everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Mindful in Minutes podcast. So I'm Kelly, and today we're going to be talking all about the magic of Yoga Nidra. So we're going to talk about what this practice is, how it works, why it's so powerful, and if you aren't practicing it yet, why maybe I think you should. And then I'm also going to be sharing a little bit about my Yoga Nidra teacher training because the online version is finally here. Everything's going to unlock on June 1st, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the end. So this is certainly not going to be one big plug for the teacher training, but that is coming. And it inspired me to do this episode because I'm just really excited that it's here, and I love Yoga Nidra so much. So long-time listeners, like long-time listeners might be thinking, Kelly, didn't you already release an episode like this 6-ish years ago? Yes, I did. And a while back, several years ago, I took that episode down because one, the audio wasn't great. And second, I've just learned so much more about Yoga Nidra since then. And I wanted to really do this practice justice. So I wasn't so happy with that episode. And so a couple years ago, I took it down and I thought, when I'm ready, I'll revisit it. And so that's what I'm doing here. And so this is the plan. This is what I'm thinking for our time together. So we're going to definitely do like a Yoga Nidra 101. So what it is, how it works, why it works. We're going to share some of the science, the philosophy, the magic behind the practice, maybe talk a little bit about who it's for and how it transforms, like what it works really well for. And then at the end, I'm going to share Yoga Nidra teacher training and a little bit of an offer. But basically the TLDR for that, if anyone's listening and they're like, wait, I just want to get to Yoga Nidra teacher training, I don't want to wait till the end. This is like the TLDR. There's going to be a link in the show notes, or you can go to yogaforyouonline.com/Yoga Nidra TT. If you use code I love you, all caps, because I do love you, you're going to get $50 off of enrollment if you join before June 1st. And you're also going to get a bonus module, and you'll get access to monthly office hours with me where you can ask your Yoga Nidra questions, your business questions, anything like that. I do this for meditation teacher training too. I'll be doing it for Yoga Nidra teacher training. It is 25 hours of content. And yeah, I feel like I took my signature Yoga Nidra teacher training that I had been teaching in person for years and made it even better. And now it's completely done at your own pace. And I'm going to just open up enrollment for the summer. So that's a TLDR, but I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. So let's talk all about Yoga Nidra. So what is it? What is Yoga Nidra? Also, depending on either who taught you or my understanding is that I pronounce it Yoga Nidra. I know some people pronounce it Yoga Nidra. If you are a Yoga Nidra person and it is just going to bother you and trigger you for the next probably hour, just be prepared now because I am going to call it Yoga Nidra. My understanding is it depends on who taught your teacher, or like basically what part of India your teacher was from. And because it just kind of like... In Minnesota, every place has things like this, but in Minnesota, like in Minneapolis in the city, we call, like, I don't know why this is the example that comes to mind, but we call them like pecans, right? Like the nut. I like to put them on my oatmeal. But people up north, like way up north, the Iron Range, my Minnesota listeners, you'll know what I'm talking about. They call them pecans. And so it's kind of like that, where it's like, I don't know, to me, calling it a pecan just feels so wrong, but it just kind of depends on how you were taught. So I was taught Yoga Nidra, so you're going to hear me say that the whole time. So Yoga Nidra means yogic sleep or conscious sleep. And it's this practice that's designed to get your body asleep while keeping your mind awake. So it's really a way to get your body, mind, and emotional body to be at its absolute deepest state of relaxation. And this is done by moving through the different brainwave patterns and layers of our being, or koshas, to really release to really reach a relaxed state where you can set an intention and connect with the true self, or just give your body and mind time to rest and restore. So often it's described as a state of sleep in which you are so relaxed that you can't move, but you also are still kind of aware. It's like your body's asleep, but your consciousness is awake. I think of it as that state when you're falling asleep at night, and it's like you're in really light sleep. You have like one foot in sleep and one foot out, and you are like so tired and so relaxed that if someone were to walk into your bedroom, like your partner, your roommate, your kid, whatever, someone were to walk into your bedroom when you're falling asleep, you would like hear them and be like, oh, so-and-so's walking in here. Oh, I hear my mom coming in here, whatever. But you'd be so relaxed, you might like not do anything or say anything. It's really like that sensation where the body's sleeping, but you're still slightly aware of what's happening around you. You can hear things like that. It really is like one foot in, one foot out. And so with Yoga Nidra, we're trying to consciously take you to that place. Now, often people will fall asleep in Yoga Nidra. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but basically what that means, because I always have people that ask me, they say, Kelly, I always sleep through Yoga Nidra. What does that mean? It's like they're looking for some big, huge answer to something. And honestly, it means that you're tired. And I know that that's not a satisfying answer, but our bodies are always going to prioritize what we need most, fulfill our basic needs, like a need for rest and sleep, before it's going to take a conscious journey through the different layers of our being to come face to face with the true self. So that's what that means. But in an ideal world, we're trying to put the body to sleep while the mind is still staying awake and aware. When you are practicing Yoga Nidra, it feels like a long guided meditation. So the delivery is the same. That's why, I have quite a few full Yoga Nidra practices. There's going to be another one on Sunday. This is going to be an anxiety Yoga Nidra practice. And it really lends itself well to something like podcasting because it is an audio format. It's a non-movement style of yoga, and it's a deep practice of pratyahara. So pratyahara is withdrawal of the senses. It's one of the 8 limbs of yoga, and it really is this conscious journey inward, or this method of like releasing the external world, external stimulus, like sensory input information, and allowing yourself to really reside internally, like within your own existence. It's a deep, deep, deep withdrawal of the senses. And it's like finding that really still space within you and not being distracted by all the sensory input. And so Yoga Nidra is like one of the deepest and most pure practices of pratyahara that we have. When we meditate, we do get a little bit of that light kind of pratyahara, right? When we start turning inward, especially when we have practices that are very reflective, kind of internalized, right? Where we're gazing inward instead of outward. But Yoga Nidra is like very deep and pure pratyahara. And so when we're working with Yoga Nidra, I want you to think about an onion, even if that's cliche, or like a bullseye. So Yoga Nidra itself, I think it really gets hyped up for, you always hear this statistic where they say 45 minutes of Yoga Nidra is equivalent to 3 hours of sleep at night. And so the biohackers have kind of taken this statistic and they've just like run with it. And it's kind of like a yes and. So that is kind of true. And I think that with stats like that, people really focus on Yoga Nidra as being this way to either biohack out of sleep or like as a workaround to like not actually getting the rest and the sleep that they need. And it's so much more than that. Like that is a piece of it where it is extremely restorative and restful for your body, very beneficial physically for, the physical body, your hormones, all of that. But it's so much more than that. Yoga Nidra is this practice of taking a conscious journey through all of the layers of your being. So your physical body, your energetic body, your emotional body, your wisdom body, your bliss body, and then your true self. So think of it maybe instead of like an onion or a bullseye, think of it as like those little Russian nesting dolls, right? So you have like the original one in the center, and then you have like the copies, right? You have the one big one, then you open it and there's a copy in the inside, and then you open it and there's a copy of that one on the inside. And you keep opening them until you eventually get to like the original. It doesn't open, right? The other ones are just bigger copies of it. We are like that. Or if you think about the koshas as that, it is, we have our true self, Atman, our soul space, our truest, our most authentic self, that thing, our spark, our essence, whatever you want to call it. That is like that true one, that true doll. And then we have these other layers that kind of go around it. And Yoga Nidra is designed to, in a very specific way. And like when I do Yoga Nidra teacher training, a big piece of it is basically the blueprint, because you're always going to do, and if you've listened to a lot of these practices, you've probably noticed a pattern, but you always will do like body stuff, followed by breath stuff, followed by feeling stuff, followed by imagery, followed by statements, things like that. It will always go in that order, because each technique that is put into a Yoga Nidra practice or script it has an intention, and it is speaking a different language of the different koshas. So it's kind of speaking to each layer one by one with the different techniques, consciously bringing you closer and closer and closer to that true self. And then at the end, hopefully, you're face to face with the true self. We're going to plant a positive seed of intention, or we call it a sankalpa. And that truest self, the soul space, the most authentic self, Atman, whatever you call it, that is like the most fertile soil for manifestation, for change. I mean, it is like our truest, most authentic self. And so if you think about these seeds of intention that we're planting, so for Sunday's practice, it is one all around soothing your anxiety and releasing anxiety in body, thoughts, and heart. And so that statement, I can't remember exactly what it is off the top of my head, but that statement, it's a positive one around releasing that anxiety, planting it. We'll say it at the beginning of the practice, kind of just stating the intention, but we also say it at the end, because we've consciously gone through this journey, use these different techniques in a very intentional way, in an intentional order, to hopefully bring you, the Yoga Nidra student or practitioner, to like face to face with your true self. And that's where you want to really plant that seed of intention. And then you can imagine you've planted that seed, and it'll start to grow back out through those layers. So back out through the bliss body, the wisdom body, the mental body, the energetic body, the physical body, where it'll then blossom into your everyday life, into your everyday world living. And when we work with Yoga Nidra, this idea of sankalpa, of intention, is so powerful. It's like the backbone of the practice, because yes, Yoga Nidra is relaxing. Yes, it is wonderful for your need for rest. Yes, it's super supportive of the nervous system. It does really incredible things to your brain. It supports everything, because you've heard, if you've listened to this podcast even a little bit, you've definitely heard me talk about meditation in the brain, or the benefits of rest, what's happening in your body when you relax and you slow down and all that. You do get all those benefits with Yoga Nidra, but then it's like, I want to say like tenfold. That's not a true statistic, but it's like that, but then bigger, because not only is it longer, Yoga Nidra practices usually fall between 30 to 60 minutes. It's longer, but you're getting really, really deep. You're trying to put the physical body to sleep. And the idea with that is that if you put the physical body to sleep, you can do work on a deeper level. So there's a lot of really interesting research on how Yoga Nidra can help support people with PTSD or CPTSD. They use something called iRest at the VA, which has a lot of similarities to Yoga Nidra. I have seen both iRest manuals. I've written Yoga Nidra manuals, and I don't want to say it's repackaged Yoga Nidra to make it more palatable and something that like the VA, I think of like my 95-year-old grandpa, Grandpa Kenny, he goes to the VA. Would he ever go to a Yoga Nidra class? No. But if like his doctor at the VA recommended like an IRAS session, would he maybe consider that? Yeah. And I'm totally fine with it. Like if people are getting what they need out of it, I think that's amazing. And IREST is something that is used in conjunction with like trained professionals to help support these veterans and their PTSD and CPTSD. But that is where you see a lot of the research when you see, when they're talking about how Yoga Nidra is so great for PTSD and things like that. A lot of times that research is coming from the VA and they're using we'll call it a variation of Yoga Nidra called IREST. But what we do know is that because Yoga Nidra is so powerful at shutting down the sensory experience, right? Pratyahara, withdrawal of the senses, turning inward, is that it can be really supportive when you have something like PTSD or you are like overwhelmed, you're overstimulated, something where the sensory experience is either triggering or overwhelming or it's just too much. When you go into that state of Yoga Nidra, you're really taking that sensory experience, you're turning the volume down on it, which can be incredibly supportive for things like that. It's also amazing for your nervous system. The reason that Yoga Nidra works so well, or the way that it works to help you really turn inward and get to that deeper state, is because it has these 6 stages, and they always go in this order. Again, they're talking to the different koshas, the different layers of our being. And you'll always start with some kind of like a preliminary relaxation technique, something to just bring you into the moment, into your body. And then you will do, the first kosha speaks in the language of the body. And so you'll do some kind of rotation of awareness in the body. A lot of times you'll have, you'll hear me do a body scan, some kind of a body scan. Sometimes it'll be longer, sometimes it'll be shorter, but we're moving our awareness through our body. Then we'll do something with our breath. This is going then another layer deeper, getting into that energetic body. We're going to do something with our breath because the energetic body speaks in the language of breath. Then we're going to go deeper into our mental body. And our mental body speaks in the language of feelings and emotions, which is kind of interesting. It feels a little bit counterintuitive, but we tap into our feelings, our emotions, kind of judging this emotional experience without judgment, just observing it. And then we move to the wisdom body, which I always think it's interesting to note that a layer deeper than our mental body is going to be our wisdom body, because our mental body is made up of like our thoughts, our judgments, our the stories we tell ourselves, all of that. That's not necessarily our wisdom. That's just like mental chatter of the mind. And so moving deeper into our wisdom body, this is when then we're going to tap into some of that imagery. And then we go a layer deeper into our bliss body. And this is like when I do yoga teacher training period, but definitely Yoga Nidra teacher training, like we spend like hours on the koshas. This is just very kind of like scratching the surface. But the bliss body is then where we can, like often when people touch this space, they feel bliss, they feel blissful. And that's the final kosha, because after that lies Atman, or the true self, where then we plant that positive seed of intention. And so there's this really intentional blueprint that we follow. And every Yoga Nidra practice, to you, if you're listening to it, it just sounds like a long guided meditation. But whoever crafted that practice, if it's a true Yoga Nidra practice, it will have all of those elements. It will have techniques for every single one of the koshas. And they will be intentionally picked, not only to speak to those koshas and to consciously take you through those different layers of your being, but they're also probably picked to help support the general theme of the practice. So when I wrote Sunday's practice, a Yoga Nidra for anxiety relief, I picked like for preliminary relaxation, I picked like some big deep breaths, inhale through the nose, open mouth, exhale to stimulate the vagus nerve, because that's really great for your nervous system. I spent extra time on the body scan to help get into the body, because we know that when you have kind of that somatic experience, it helps to pull you out of your anxious thoughts, things like that. So every technique will be unique or different to the practice, and it will be picked with intention, and it should also help to support the overall general theme of the practice as well. Now, the thing that I think is really cool about Yoga Nidra, I'm just scanning my mind really quick to think about. So I talked about what it is. I talked about the koshas. I talked about the different layers. I think before I talk about what's happening in the body and in the brain, I actually want to talk a little bit about the history of Yoga Nidra, because it has this really kind of fun story. And it has ancient roots in Tantra and yogic philosophy, but it was Swami Santananda Saraswati who really formalized the practice in the 20th century. And as the story goes, he was at a new ashram. I love just like the lore of Yoga Nidra, but he was at a new ashram and he woke up at 3 a.m. to do his mantra, his chanting repetition. And he got up, he was tired because it was early in the morning, and he was doing his chanting. And at first he didn't know them. He was there, he was, learning, and he fell asleep during this practice. And then I think it was, the story goes, like 3 hours later, he woke up for like the final repetition of these. And it's an ashram, right? So they're doing these long chants. It's not just like a couple of things, right? It's these big, long, involved chants and mantra repetition. And he woke up for the last round and he knew them all perfectly. And so as the story goes, he then became a little bit obsessed with this idea of how was I able to put my body to sleep yet keep my mind awake so I could learn everything I needed to learn while I was, quote, asleep. And he was the one that then wanted to turn this into its own practice and kind of recreate this idea of putting the body to sleep and keeping the consciousness awake so you could do more on that consciousness level when the body wasn't getting in the way. And then since then, it's grown, it's kind of turned into what we have today, where it's this blueprint, this really kind of intentional practice, this formula to bring people to that state. And we're not necessarily going to that state so that we can learn our different chants, our mantra repetition, but so that we can kind of plant or incept some of these positive seeds of intention within us. And then also, as science is kind of catching up and we're learning about these great benefits, kind of do that piece that Swami Satyananda Saraswati was really interested in and inspired by. And also now we know that it's extremely supportive for things like your brain and your nervous system and your hormones and things like that. So now we do it for a few different reasons, and we've kind of woven these two together to create what's sort of like modern day Yoga Nidra. So I just think that story is so fun, and I love to share it. So what happens when you are practicing Yoga Nidra? So you may have practiced Yoga Nidra before. If you've been around Mindful Minutes for a little bit, you've definitely seen some different Yoga Nidra practices. I know certainly not everyone listens to every practice, but there's some really interesting things that happen in your brain and in your body in Yoga Nidra. So the first is how it moves you through these different brain states. So you've probably heard of the different brain states like beta, alpha, theta, delta, all of that. When you listen to like binaural beats and they say that it helps you to get into like more alpha waves, you've probably heard about different brain waves. But what's really interesting is they have done studies on people while they're doing Yoga Nidra and looked at their brainwave patterns, and they see that in a Yoga Nidra session that they're moving through all 4 brainwave states. So they start like in beta, which is kind of the thinking, right? Right now you're maybe driving in your car, going for a walk, listening to this podcast, primarily beta waves right now because you're thinking, you're hopefully engaged in this podcast. If you're driving, you're paying attention, all of that. Alpha is more of those relaxed. If your brain is just relaxed, that's going to be more alpha. Theta is kind of like dreamlike brain waves. And then delta is deep rest. Like if you're sleeping, you're going to be in a lot of, primarily like delta waves. And what they can see is during a Yoga Nidra session, even though people can recall what happened during the session, their brain is showing that they're going through these different brainwave states and that they're going from kind of this thinking to relax to dreamlike state to deep rest. And so in theory, they should be, quote, asleep, but yet they can still recall what's happening. And so it's really interesting when they look at what the brain does and what the different brainwave states are during a Yoga Nidra practice, and they studied this. This is often where you get that statistic of 45 minutes of Yoga Nidra is equal to 3 hours of sleep. Basically, that is true, but it's kind of a play on a ratio. So when you're practicing Yoga Nidra, what's happening is you're going to a deep sleep state faster than you would at night. So think about, I think actually we've done an episode on the anatomy of sleep, I want to say. If we haven't, I remember, I'll link to it in the show notes. But think of when you're sleeping at night as kind of like steps, like a staircase. You start and you're starting to fall asleep. You're at the top of the staircase. You go to light sleep. And light sleep has like a couple different stages, but like sub-stages within that. But you basically go to light sleep, or you do stage 1, stage 2. That's light sleep. This is where we're just resting. And rest is really important. We need light sleep. We spend the majority of our time at night, if you're sleeping for 8 hours or whatever, in light sleep or resting. When you go to deep sleep, that's when a lot is actually happening. That's when our tissues are regenerating. That's when our hormones are balancing. That's when we're sort of recategorizing memories in our brain. We're pruning old neurons. There's a lot happening in deep sleep. It's actually quite active. There's a lot happening in our body and in our mind in deep sleep. So it's going to be stages 3 and 4. Then we have REM, which is where we dream. We don't spend a ton of time in deep sleep. In fact, if you have like a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or an Oura Ring or something like that that tracks your sleep, look at the data and you'll see, I think you're only meant to spend maybe 10 to 15% of your nighttime sleep in like deep sleep. And that's because, again, it's quite active. There's a lot happening in that deep sleep. So if you think about a 1-hour Yoga Nidra practice, even a 45-minute Yoga Nidra practice, we can see in our brains that we're going to that deep sleep state, like physically with our bodies. And so if you are maybe spending 20 minutes of an hour-long Yoga Nidra practice in deep sleep and getting those benefits, that's going to be about equivalent to what you would get over 3 hours, because you're basically just bypassing hanging out in light sleep and kind of just going right to the deep stuff. And so it's really just a play on the ratios to how many minutes you're spending in that really deep sleep or deep rest state compared to what you would at night. So Yoga Nidra is not going to be a sub for sleeping at night. It's something that can be really supportive and beneficial, like especially if you're feeling tired, you're feeling burnt out, you're feeling overstimulated, you're feeling overwhelmed, like you need time to really just turn the volume down and like hit that reset. It is going to be really beneficial for that, but it is certainly not going to be a sub for sleeping. Some of the other things that are happening in your body and in your mind when you're practicing Yoga Nidra, so you're going into this intentional deep rest state. One is going to be you're going to get rest, which might sound, it's like, well, yeah, duh, of course. But that's so important. And we are so just chronically rest deprived. You're also going to get that pratyahara, that withdrawal of the senses. We are so overstimulated. We live in big, bright, loud, busy, overstimulating worlds, and we live these crazy lives. And so even if you're like, okay, Kelly, I'm just here for the rest and the relaxation, amazing. That's incredible. Great. I'm so happy that you're here because we need that. And that is a huge benefit in and of itself. Going a little bit deeper than that, Yoga Nidra has been shown to be really supportive for the nervous system and nervous system regulation. So we've talked a lot about the nervous system here, but what we can see and what's been studied is that Yoga Nidra can be a great practice for getting you out of that fight or flight and into rest and digest. So it's basically like a downshift for your nervous system from this activated, stimulated, I'm getting all this sensory input state into like a total, just like slow down, turn inward, go into that rest and digest. And it can be really helpful for people who are kind of stuck in this more activated, light activation of fight or flight. It's really good for helping to regulate and balance your nervous system and kind of train it to shift gears between fight or flight, rest and digest, and all that. It's also really good for your hormonal balance. And they've looked at, and when we think of hormones, we maybe think of only a few hormones, but hormones are just chemicals that are in our body, in our brains. There's so many different hormones in our bodies that have a lot of different functions, not just like estrogen and testosterone. There's so much that's going on. And it's really, really good for balancing out your hormones and hormone imbalances. And basically, the reason that this works so well for it is because you're getting into that deep relaxation state, which is where our body does some of that hormone balancing. And so you're getting to the place where you then can do that. So it's really great for that. Also, it changes the brain, just like meditation does. But again, we're spending more time there. So think about those key regions we've talked about with meditation, the amygdala. Yoga Nidra is such a great way to just turn the volume down on the amygdala. The amygdala is the pain, fear, worry, anxiety center of the brain. It's what kicks off the fight or flight response. And so for many people, they have an enlarged and overactive amygdala because our brains, neuroplasticity, right? Our brains change and adapt over time as we're constantly getting this stimulus that's saying, that stresses me out. That's overwhelming. Oh no, that's overstimulating. Our amygdala goes, oh my gosh, there's like danger and threats everywhere. I need to be ready to react at any moment and with a big reaction because it is not safe here. And then our brains adapt. Our amygdala gets bigger, it gets stronger, it gets better at firing this like huge immediate reaction. So Yoga Nidra helps to decrease that. And over time, it can help to shrink and atrophy your amygdala, where the prefrontal cortex, so that has to do with like emotion regulation, some of that higher cognitive function, memory, things like that, that's going to start to get bigger and stronger and have less of a scattered pattern and a more focused pattern in that area. So it does help to change key regions of the brain. And then there is also this piece of intention. And maybe this isn't like necessarily a scientific benefit in a way. However, Yoga Nidra was designed at its core to be a way to have your consciousness really be awake and be like a sponge to absorb things. And so when we're putting these positive messages, these positive seeds, and we're planting them in our mind, in our consciousness, it is incredibly powerful. Yoga Nidra is also great for our immune system. It is good for the tissues of our body. It's great for aging of like the physical tissues in the brain, things like that. And I personally have found it to be really helpful when I have found myself just feeling really run down and burnt out. Like, when you I'm sure so many people have had this experience where you're like, what do you need? And you're like, I need like a 4-day nap. Like, I'm just so tired. I need like to take a break for like a week and not just, take it. Like, I need to like be comatose for like a week and just reset. When I get to that state, Yoga Nidra is really great for that. Granted, I should be using it much more so I don't get to that state. But when you're at that like so tired, so burnt out, so overwhelmed, Yoga Nidra is amazing for those states to help just soothe that a little bit and help to fill your bucket back up. It's also been shown to really help improve your sleep. So if you're someone who struggles to fall asleep, stay asleep, you have insomnia, whatever your personal brand of sleep issue is, Yoga Nidra is amazing at helping you sleep because it not only helps you fall asleep faster, but they've done these really interesting studies on people who practice Yoga Nidra, what happens to their sleep over time, especially people that have different sleep disturbances or disorders. And what happens is that they find that sleep across the board improves. So not just falling asleep faster, getting better sleep, but having less wake-ups at night. And what they believe is happening is because in Yoga Nidra, you're going through the different sleep stages. So again, we have that staircase. When you're sleeping at night, one sleep cycle is basically going down the staircase to the bottom at REM sleep, and then you start going back up. So you go light sleep, so you go stage 1, stage 2, you're going down the staircase 3 and 4. At the bottom of the staircase is REM. Then you go back out. So you go from REM, you go 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you kind of go to light stage. Maybe you wake up, you might not remember, you might move around, adjust a little bit, then you start another cycle. So in a Yoga Nidra practice, you're almost getting a full, complete like sleep cycle. And it's basically training your body and your mind to be able to walk down that staircase and back up with more ease. So a lot of sleep disturbances, sleep disorders, there's something that's happening on that staircase where maybe you are getting stuck in stage 3, or you are, when you go back up to stage 1 and you're going to the top of the staircase, instead of going back down again, you then completely wake up and you can't fall back asleep. And so Yoga Nidra is kind of a way of training your body and your mind to be able to complete these sleep cycles, and you get better at it over time, which is really interesting. So Yoga Nidra is amazing for sleep overall, your overall sleep. And like, is anyone listening? Let me know. Is anyone like, I never have sleep problems. I sleep amazing. every single night, all the time. I sleep. I have no problems. I never get stressed and wake up in the middle of the night. I feel like even if it's just short-lived, like I'm very, very fortunate. I mean, I'm looking at all the wood, knock on all of the wood in this little closet that I'm sitting in right now. Also, I don't know why. I'll tell you what I'm about to say, and then I'll tell you why this is a silly thing to say because it didn't happen last night. What I'll say is, by and large, both Poppy and Porkchop have been sleeping better, which means I am sleeping better. Poppy is finally getting to an age where she is sleeping through the night. Like, thank God. That's where I want to knock on wood. I did start my day at 3 a.m. this morning, courtesy of Porkchop. He just woke up at 3 a.m. So, is anyone batting 100 on this stuff? No, I'm not. I don't think anyone is. By and large, if both of the kids are sleeping, then I'm sleeping. And according to like my sleep data, things like that, I'm sleeping pretty well. Porkchop just woke up at, he can't tell time. He's still so little. And he wakes up like usually at like 5 anyways when it's dark out. And so I think sometimes he just wakes up and it's like 2:30 or 3. And he's like, well, it's dark out and I feel rested, so I'm just going to start my day. And then he like gets so mad and I'm like, you have to go back to bed. And it's just a battle. Anyway, so I just started my day at 3 o'clock this morning. But again, no one is batting 100 with sleep. And what I will say, though, in terms of my personal sleep is it has really improved, and I give a lot of credit to yoga nidra, meditation, things like that, so that when I do get the opportunity to sleep, courtesy of my sweet little cherubs, the sleep quality is good. And as long as I'm not stressed out, every once in a while when I have like a big project or always before a retreat, even though I love retreats, when I'm thinking about all the different things that are happening and all the moving pieces, I might wake up with a busy brain sometimes. But overall, for now, as long as everyone else sleeps, I'm also sleeping. So I want to talk a little bit about what yoga nidra is not. So yoga nidra is not hypnosis. Hypnosis is also a great tool. However, yoga nidra is not hypnosis. Hypnosis is something where the person who is leading it is sort of in the driver's seat. So like when I do past life regression sessions with Gina, and that is through hypnosis, and like Gina is in the driver's seat. And so she's saying, okay, you're doing this. Okay. And you're sort of having this dialogue back and forth where she's like, okay, now imagine you're standing somewhere. Like, where are you standing? What are you standing on? And I'll talk back to her. It's kind of a little bit more of like a dialogue. Where yoga nidra, there's no dialogue. You just go deep, and like you couldn't even really talk if you wanted to, because you're getting like deep, and like the physical body is asleep. And so there's no dialogue back and forth. And the person practicing yoga nidra, they are in the driver's seat. Like, they're in control. You'll go as deep as you want to go or you can go. So yeah, it's not hypnosis. It's not traditional meditation, because meditation is single-pointed concentration. It's taking that light bulb, turning it into a laser pointer, taking that laser, pointing it at one thing. Yoga nidra is more about putting the body to sleep and keeping the mind open. So it's almost like taking that light bulb, and instead of turning it into a laser pointer, you're just turning the light all the way up on the light bulb and like letting it be fully like luminous and just a sponge. And it's not just lying in shavasana. It is a conscious journey through the self to the self. And even though yoga nidra means yogic sleep, it is not meant to be yogic nap. Now, do people sleep through this? Yes. As I talked about before, it is, if you're tired and you need sleep, your body is going to prioritize meeting your basic needs over taking a conscious journey through the different layers of our being to plant a positive seed of intention in our true self. It's just going to do it every time, because which one is more important? Meeting the basic needs. Because if you're not meeting the basic needs, you can't do some of the deeper stuff. So if you do, and it's not bad to fall asleep to yoga nidra. I want to say that too. A lot of people listen to yoga nidra. My top Mindful Minutes episode ever, I think, is yoga nidra for sleep, or it's definitely in like the top 5 yoga nidra for sleep. And it like outpaces that. Like, we're talking like hundreds of thousands of listens. And I know it's a lot of people listening to it like every night. If, for example, let's say 1,000 people listen to it every single night for a year, well, there you go. Then there's 365,000 listens on that one practice. That's not bad. Yoga Nidra is so good and so useful, like I said, for sleep, not only to overall improve your sleep over time, but it's a really great tool to put you to sleep because we're trying to put our body to sleep so it's easy for the mind to follow. And then you go to sleep. So that is not bad. But it's not meant to necessarily be like yoga nap time in a way. It's intended to be something where you can really shut down the senses, shut down the physical body, go deep and open up your consciousness. So who might want to practice Yoga Nidra? First of all, Yoga Nidra truly is for everyone. I love Yoga Nidra for everyone because, first of all, everyone needs rest. Everyone needs relaxation. Everyone needs to turn inward and soothe the senses. But I also love how inclusive it is. So as long as you can hear, that's the only thing that really can be, if you can't hear, then you can't really hear the practice. Not to say that you can't get to a state of Yoga Nidra, but if you're just doing like a Yoga Nidra practice, that would be the only thing, like as a teacher, that wouldn't work. Otherwise, anything else. Anything. You can have bad knees. You can, so many that I'm thinking of all the things that people come, even like physically, bad knees, hip replacements, blindness, neurodivergence, sensory processing issue, whatever it is, whatever your thing is, as long as you can hear, like you can practice Yoga Nidra. And it's particularly helpful for people who have PTSD. But again, do not come to me. Please don't hear. I just said that like I personally will do a Yoga Nidra practice on this podcast and like it will cure your PTSD. This is something that can be really supportive for PTSD while you are also getting the support of a trained professional. But it can be really good for that. Anxiety, chronic pain, insomnia, hormone imbalances, and stress. People who are really struggling with stress and burnout. I would say those are the people that this can be really great for, and that there's been more research in Yoga Nidra and how it supports PTSD, anxiety, chronic pain, hormone imbalances, and then sleep are the big ones that they've looked into. So is there anyone out there listening that hasn't experienced any of those things, whether it be stress, insomnia, some kind of pain, anxiety, PTSD, anything else, hormone imbalances, or anyone who just wants to plant positive seeds of intention, get to know their true selves better? Because that's another thing that I love about Yoga Nidra is that when you take this conscious journey and you come face to face with the true self, you get to meet your true self. And so many of us just want to tap into that space. And every time you practice Yoga Nidra, you go through the koshas and you come to your true self. It's like you're building that relationship with your true self. It becomes easier to live from that space, which I love. You guys know that I think the secret to really living a happy and fulfilling life is by living from the true self space. And Yoga Nidra is a great way to connect with that. And so my little pitch for if you've never practiced Yoga Nidra, why I think you might want to give it a try is one, not only is it so great and supportive for so many things that we just by and large, again, is there anyone listening who has an experience, wants better sleep or less stress or less anxiety or support for even the regeneration of their physical tissues, things like that? I think that it has so many benefits that it applies to everyone, but I also think that we do not take the time. I know people, because I've heard people say this, they'll be like, oh, I skip when it's a Yoga Nidra practice because it's just so long. I don't have time for that. And I want to challenge that belief. I want to challenge that because if you do not have time, and also I respect it. I get it, right? We live busy lives. I also live a busy life. I understand there's a lot going on. But if you feel like you're just so go that you don't have time for this, you don't have to practice Yoga Nidra every day. You could practice it once a week, even once a month. But if you're saying, I always skip the Yoga Nidra practices because they're just too long, I want to challenge that. Why? What are you doing that's so much more important all the time, that you can't make time for something that can be so great for your body, your mind, and your heart? And just if you haven't tried it, just Just give it a try, because it is great. I know we talk a lot about the science and things like that, but it can be a really transformative spiritual experience. I don't know why I felt weird saying that. But it really can be like when you slow down and you turn inward and you connect to your true self and you plant a positive seed for intention, whether it be for anxiety, or there's other yoga nidra practices on this feed for like happiness, for peace, for sleep. I think there's maybe one for confidence. And you set those positive seeds of intention, it really can be transformational. And I've had people practicing and like be brought to tears because they felt like they came face to face with their true self, or they felt like they let go of some of that gunk that was maybe stuck in some of those deeper layers. And if you've never tried it before, just try it and see what it's like. I promise you that there's something you're doing, especially at night. I think it's best to practice yoga nidra, in my opinion, lying down at night and just do the yoga nidra practice. And when it's done, just go straight to sleep, because you're kind of like halfway there anyways. But you're probably doing something at night, whether it be scrolling on your phone or watching Netflix or something that's not super supportive for your sleep. And so just one time for one night, just give it a try and just see what happens. Just see what you think. Let me know. Maybe on Sunday's episode, let me know, like in the Spotify comments, or tell me in the DMs, like if you've never done yoga nidra before, but you're going to give it a try. Let me know what you think. I genuinely want to know. But when we get into that mindset of like, I don't have time for this, we kind of need it even more. That's when we really need it, because we're probably neglecting some of those basic needs like rest and relaxation. So ending here with yoga nidra teacher training, because that is what inspired me to finally circle back and bring back this the magic of yoga nidra, talk about what yoga nidra is, why it works, and things like that. So I've been doing yoga nidra teacher training for years. You've heard about it a lot on this podcast, especially if you've been around for a while. I've always been teaching it in person, doing pop-ups. Sometimes I will do virtually, but it's always like live. Like it's me with Zoom. We're doing it in real time. I have been taking that training and making it bigger and better, and it's now a done at your own pace version. So it is 25 hours of content. I am so proud of it. It is 8 different modules, and I'm actually going to pull it up really quick, and I'll just tell you what those different modules are. And this, like what we talked about, this has been 45 minutes of chatting about yoga nidra. This is like a drop in the bucket. There is so much more, especially when you are sharing yoga nidra with others. Not only is this something that we so desperately need, like as a society, people are craving yoga nidra and needing it, but there's so much more to it that I love teaching. And so the first module is just kind of like intro and welcome, how to get the most out of this training, the manual, a gear guide, all of that. Then we go into the foundations of yoga nidra. So what we talked about today is probably the closest to that second module, but we'll talk about what it is. We'll do a guided practice. We'll dive really deep into the history. I shared just that one little story, but there's more to it. And then how to set up really successfully for a yoga nidra practice, like how to use props and blankets and all of that. Then we go into a really robust science and anatomy section. So talking about the anatomy of yoga nidra and sleep, the benefits of yoga nidra and your brain, yoga nidra and your nervous system. We'll also talk about the vagus nerve. And we talked about maybe all of that, maybe 10, 15 minutes. All of those things that I listed out, they all have their own lecture on those things. So they're anywhere from like 15 minutes on the short end to like 30 plus minute lectures just on those individual things. There's tons of content in there. Then we talk about the koshas a lot. That's module 4. Koshas, sankalpa, and intention. We talk a lot about the koshas. So if you found that interesting, the different layers of our being, we're going to spend like 2 hours on it, talking all about the koshas. And then sankalpa, or intention. So how do you craft a yoga nidra intention or sankalpa? Like, what is the power of it? How is it really working? And there's a science to creating that statement that we say in a yoga nidra practice. And I'll teach you how to do it both for groups. So something like this podcast, or I do kind of monthly yoga nidra practices here in the Twin Cities, but also if you have private clients, because you can do yoga nidra and do an intention that's so specific. Like I've done them before for people who had anxiety on their wedding day to people who wanted a yoga nidra practice for when they were going in for an egg transfer, things like that. You can get so specific. And the 5th module is the biggest. This is where I teach you the yoga nidra blueprint. This is where I teach you the exact order to the techniques. I give you, I think it's like over 20 different techniques that you can plug in. I talk about which is best for what, maybe how you can adjust it for like different lengths, if you're doing different themes. Like this is where, if you're thinking about teaching yoga nidra and you might be thinking, well, I could just get scripts off online and read them. You could do that, or you could learn how to write your own and pick every single word that you say, every single technique in your practice with intention and knowing why you're saying it, why it's in that order, why you're delivering it in that way, because you know how. And I will teach you how to do that. And there's so much in that module. Then I will give you a lot on like how you then write your own scripts. I do kind of a live demo where I actually walk through. I like in real time sit down with like a blank Google Doc and we write Sunday's episode. You guys know it'll be Sunday's episode, but like in the training, I'm just like, okay, I'm going to write a anxiety relief yoga nidra, and I kind of talk out that whole creative process as I'm doing it. And then there's a whole module just on teaching. So talking about music and sound, how to lead your class, how to do private sessions versus groups, like general guidelines and best practices for leading yoga nidra. And then there is a final project. So you do get a certificate when you're at the end, and it's like a true training where you will submit a final project to me, and you kind of write out a script and you send me an audio recording. I review it, and then I send you your certificate. As long as you try, you'll pass, so no one panic. But this is where the goodies are. So if you join Yoga Nidra Teacher Training before June 1st, all the content is unlocking in June 1st. You can join after, but if you are listening before June 1st, that gives you almost 2 weeks, you are going to get a bonus module on, I'm going to have a whole masterclass and workshop on mastering guided audio. So it's a little bit over an hour where I show you how to create custom professional sounding audios from home. Like so DIY, like how I run this whole podcast from a small closet in my room. I show you exactly how to do that, like everything. Like you download this free software, plug this thing into this thing, then you click this button, then you record this. If there's background noise, you do this. I walk you through that whole thing so that you can have professional sounding audios. Like I also narrate audiobooks, and I use the same setup for audiobooks on Audible. And it's very DIY. And then I'm also going to do a bonus Insight Timer 101 workshop. So that is a place where especially something, whether it be guided meditations, but particularly Yoga Nidra, if you want to start making your return on your investment right away, you can record some practices and put them on Insight Timer, and you will start getting paid residuals. That's something that I've done before. I've had a lot of students use Insight Timer and have success. A lot of my Yoga Nidra grads have done that and had a lot of success. So I'm going to do a workshop on how you can do that as well. So you get those 2 bonus workshops, the Mastering Guided Audios and Insight Timer 101. I'm also going to give you $50 off of enrollment. So it's usually $347. So it's going to make it $297. You're going to use code all caps I love you, because I do love my Mindful Minutes listeners so much. And then you're also going to get access to office hours. So I do this for meditation teacher training. You're going to get the chance to do it in Yoga Nidra too, where once a month I just open up a Zoom. You can send your questions in ahead of time and I'll answer them and send you the recording. Or you can show up live and you can ask me questions about anything. It can be about teaching Yoga Nidra. It could be about building your business. It can be, I've had people show up and say, hey, here's my website. Can you do an audit of my pricing and give me feedback on that? Like the limit of what people ask in office hours, like the limit has not been reached yet. And you're going to get access to that as well. So every month we meet and I will give you access to office hours. I am capping the amount of people that can join Yoga Nidra teacher training as well, because I personally review all of these final projects. I always cap enrollment because I want to make sure that I can sit down and as people, and you can send in your projects whenever you get, there's no set date. due by whatever, August 30th or whatever it is. But anytime I do enrollment for either meditation teacher training or now yoga nidra teacher training, I limit the amount of people that can come in at one time so that I can make sure I can be present with those students. So I am limiting that. The information will be in the show notes, including like the coupon code, the link, all of that. I would love to have you in Yoga Nidra teacher training if it's speaking to you, this first kind of inaugural cohort. If you have questions, let me know. Email me, info@yogaforyouonline.com. Otherwise, that is what is going on. Again, everything unlocks in June 1st. You will be able to join a little bit after that. I think I'm going to close doors on June 3rd. But if you join before June 1st, you're going to get all those bonuses. So $50 off. So the coupon code's expiring on the 1st. Those 2 extra workshops, access to office hours, all of that. So thank you for being here. If you're still here, thank you. I appreciate you. And I hope you have an amazing, wonderful day. And I'll see you on Sunday for a yoga nidra practice.